too am grateful to the Archbishop for securing and for setting the tone of this debate. I'm also very grateful to the Noble Lord, Lord Sharma, for his impressive speech and look forward to much more of his contribution in this chamber. And I'm glad to follow the Noble Lord, Lord Elliot, and realise that there is more that unites us than divides us, and indeed there are overlaps with many of the contributions from the benches opposite in what I am about to say, because I do want to speak of a particular place and of particular people. But to begin with Liverpool, as the Noble Lord, Lord Elliot, mentioned, it was David Shepherd, Bishop of Liverpool, who ordained me deaconess in Liverpool Cathedral and who helped me to understand the stresses port cities experience as global trade and human migration patterns shift and port cities absorb or endure or thrive on the consequent change. Bishop David and his Archbishop and Free Church colleagues were well aware that social unrest was a symptom of the impact of felt injustice and a stimulus to work to create justice and peace. Better together was their theme and their motto in a city divided on economic, racial and religious grounds. By contrast, my adopted city of Bristol has a long-established tradition of riot. In 1831, as the city expanded and industrialised, there were violent protests focused on a local magistrate and the Bishop of Bristol. Both men opposed to the Great Reform Bill. The jails and the Bishop's Palace were destroyed. The cathedral was set on fire. In 1980 and 1986, after years of tensions between the police and those who had arrived after the Second World War at our invitation from the Caribbean, and who were the descendants of those enslaved and traded from Africa by Bristol-registered ships, erupted in violent unrest as a sense of profound injustice which continued to counter the peace and prosperity of the city, which remained fragile. But at the same time, in the 1980s, it was John Savage, a business leader and entrepreneur formed by Anglicanism's bridge-building tradition, who led the Bristol initiative to build common ground between the estranged tribes of the City Council, the Society of Merchant Venturers, and the entrepreneurs and industrialists of the city. John, now a lay canon of the cathedral, understood that, as with so many other places, and as the psalmist puts it, a vision is essential if the people are not to get out of hand. John's articulated intention was to create a city which, by 2050, would be a just, sustainable, healthy and hopeful environment in which all of us could live. And there are, flowing from his Bristol initiative, programmes and plans to implement that vision in conversation with the City Council. That is the underpinning of Bristol's One City commitment, drawing together public, private, voluntary, creative and community organisations. The One City partners meet fortnightly. They include vice-chancellors, hospital and social care leaders, the community leaders of our many communities, and the whole of the not-for-profit sector. We meet quarterly in a major gathering and sense the stresses which are emerging, and we look to causes and collaborative responses. Currently, our focus is on reducing knife crime and school absenteeism. The One City approach was fundamental to our COVID response and to enabling honest debate after Colston's statue was felled. We are seeking now to forge a new narrative which reflects the experience of all Bristolians. The One City approach has sustained a culture which nurtures bridging and bonding links and relationships, builds trust and allows for change. So my diocese, the parishes and the cathedral play their part. Last year, the cathedral, following prayers as the Ramadan fast ended in an adjacent building, welcomed its Muslim neighbours for their grand iftar in the cathedral nave itself. And St Mary Redcliffe, for a while the preserve of Bristol elites, has re-embedded itself in its local, often marginalised community, particularly welcoming refugees. And Eastern Christian Family Centre, an Anglican church, school and community hub, has become, in the name of Christ, a place of prayer and service for all people in a parish which is almost entirely Muslim. All this has buttressed the bonds of peace so that when tensions arise around migration, faith and race do not overspill and fall apart. So the Church stood in solidarity with other communities to protect the asylum seekers in Redcliffe Hotel during the riot, the one riot we had. Police and demonstrators then communicated to prevent further unrest. And the One City commitment survived and was stress tested. But it remains fragile, dependent on healthy state, business and voluntary enterprises. And the stresses are now considerable. St Mary Redcliffe and the cathedral need major works to improve accessibility and reduce their carbon impact. They await news from government about the renewal of the listed places of worship grant scheme. Without that 20% grant, projects costed us hundreds of thousands of pounds are now at risk. And more seriously, it is the sense of the reduction of the impact on our outreach and our bonding and bridging capital, which is crucial. Similarly, as we have heard from the Noble Baroness Fraser, the national insurance increases have had a huge impact. So I look for some reassurance that the government will respond to the enterprising work that is being done in cities like Bristol to build the bonds of peace and to renew the justice in our divided city.